السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the world, and may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and His pure immaculate Ahlul Bayt. I would like to thank the community for giving me the honor to come and benefit from you and share a few thoughts with you during the next few nights. I'll try to keep it short, and tonight I want to address one or two problems in relation to the crisis of Muslim identity, especially in the West, but it can apply to the East too, due to the global nature of the world today. But there's a crisis in relation to Muslim identity, and there are many causes. I don't want to pretend to tell you what they all are, but maybe one or two of the causes which are significant, especially for those being bred in this country, it may be of some benefit. Because one problem that we're facing, especially in the West today, when people from the East are migrating and they're coming to countries like America and Europe and living here, is that many of you, your parents and your grandparents, were brought up in an educational system which was very different to the educational system that you're experiencing here in the West. The way they were taught aqaid, the way they were taught in general, is very different. The way your parents, grandparents were taught in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and so on and so forth, was very different to the way you're used to learning today here in the West. Children today, from high school to university, they're brought up in a system where they're told to evaluate everything, question everything, criticize everything. But your parents or grandparents were brought up in a system where whatever they were told, they would accept, full stop. They weren't used to this, or they weren't even taught how to evaluate or question things. On the whole, I don't want to generalize. But then you see this vast difference of approach between the educational system, and now the child wants to learn Tawheed, wants to learn Nubuwwah, prophethood, wants to learn about Ma'ad, resurrection, and they're not convinced with the answers their parents and grandparents give. Because of that vast difference of approach that they're used to here in the West. And they want to question things. It's the youth, they're rational, they're using their rationality. So this is a problem. So if the youth in some places are becoming a bit distant from religion, it's not that they don't like religion. They're not being satiated from their parents and grandparents. It's a natural phenomenon. Maybe there's no particular one entity which is to blame, but this is happening. Now, how can we solve this? Now, I'm not going to pretend I'm going to give the solution, but tonight I'll give one or two statements from the scholars and then examples during the next few nights, inshallah. Now, last time I came here during Fatimiyya, last April, I think it was, I read Imam Khomeini's letter to the then president of the Soviet Union. And I won't read it again, but it was a letter to the West in general on how to invite the West And when I say West, it includes Muslims and non-Muslims. Muslims, the youth, and the non-Muslims in general. But how to invite the West to Islam. See, that was the gist of the letter. It wasn't just a political letter. It was a letter for the West on how to learn Islam. Or it was a letter for how Islam should be introduced to the West. Now this is coming from Imam Khomeini, someone who was in his early 20s, not only a mujtahid in fiqh and usul, but in akhlaq, tafsir, philosophy, Irfan. Before marriage, he was a mujtahid in 5 or 6 fields. From such a person who passed his test with the Islamic Revolution, we don't have many of those kind of people. So it's of value what he says. I'm not saying what he's saying is 100%, but it's of value because he's passed the test of time. Now, just in case one or two of you weren't here, I'm only going to read the last paragraph very quickly, where Imam said to Gorbachev, "I shan't tie you further and shall not name books of the Urafa, the Gnostics, especially those of Muhyiddin ibn Arabi, because assuming you desire to be informed of the discussions and writings of this great personality, you must send a number of your genius, specialist, experts who have a strong basis in such matters to Rome, so that after several years, with reliance upon Allah, they can become aware of the depth and thinner than hair delicateness of the stations of ma'rifah, of gnosis, for without making such a journey, awareness of such knowledge is not feasible." So here, Imam, after mentioning the names of Farabi, Avicenna, 2 important philosophers, Suhrawardi, another important philosopher, Mullah Sadra, he then came and introduced the Urafa, especially Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi, it doesn't matter whether he was a Sunni or a Shia, although Imam, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh, others, they've proved he was Shia, but that's not the point here. Let's not get distracted. But he was a Sufi. Sufism being the science of Islam. Irfan, he was an Arif. Why did Imam think that Irfan was important when introducing Islam to the West? See, this is important for how to solve this crisis of Muslim identity in the West. Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh Omari, Hafadahullah, in one of his books, 1001 Points, he's one of the great Urafa of today. There are many of them, he's one of them. He says, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh, for 17 years he was a student of Allama Tabatabai and many other scholars. Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh is someone who has studied more fiqh and usul than Irfan and philosophy. 35 years ago, he was ready to publish his Risale that the Marojid usually produce, but he saw a bigger objective, he put it aside. These people are mujtahids in many fields. Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh in one of his books says, in reality, if it were not for the learning and teaching, then he mentions a number of books. If it were not for the learning and teaching of the likes of Tamheed al-Qawaid by Ibn Turki, a very important book in Irfan, Shawahid al-Rububiyyah by Mullah Sadra, Khaji Tusi's commentary of Isharat, Khaji Tusi, an important philosopher, Isharat by Avicenna, Fusus al-Hikam by Ibn Arabi, and its commentaries, especially Allama Qaysari's commentary of Fusus al-Hikam, Asfar by Mullah Sadra, Misbah al-Uns by Ibn Fanari, Shifa by Avicenna, and Futuhat al-Makkiyah. If it wasn't for the learning and teaching of these books, the understanding of secrets that are concealed in the ahadith which are the inner dimensions of the verses of the Quran, will not be feasible. In all truth, these aforementioned noble books must be deemed as esoteric inner interpretations for elevating one's understanding of the Muhammadan message, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which is the Quran. To understand the Quran, he says these books are important. The Quran has dimensions to it. The Quran is multi-dimensional, it's multi-layered. According to traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, each verse has an infinite number of inner dimensions. Why should we suffice with one layer and one dimension of the Quran? There's no limit to it. Ayatollah Hassan Zah says these books have to be learned. Now we can't all go to the seminaries to learn these books. But these books have been explained and simplified by many scholars today, and that is accessible, those scholars' books. One of them being Ayatollah Hassan Zah only, another Ayatollah Jawadi only, and many others. In another of his books, he writes, Ayatollah Hassan Zah, Irfan is the science of building man, which in effect involves the soul's ascension to knowing Allah and the soul's elevation by incorporating the divine lordly attributes within oneself and to discipline oneself with the divine etiquettes. An Irfan-less community is tantamount to a lifeless corpse. I think this is not the average scholar saying this. A community without Irfan is like a lifeless corpse. If you suffice with the superficial understanding of religion, if you suffice with the superficial dimension, you won't grow. That's not to say the superficial dimension isn't important. The letter of the law, which is a prima facie understanding of religion, the superficial aspect, the letter of the law, the Sharia, it may be one dimension, it may be superficial, but it's essential. You can't do without the letter of the law. You can't do without the Sharia. The problem is when you suffice with the letter of the law. يعلمون ظاهرا من الحياة الدنيا وهم عن الآخرة هم غافلون. They know the superficial aspect of the worldly life, but in relation to the realms beyond the physical, the hereafter, they're ignorant. They're oblivious to what is beyond. أَعِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ الْغَيْبِ فَهُوَ يَرَى. Does one have knowledge of the unseen to qualify as a seer? When you start seeing the ghaib, the metaphysical, beyond this physical realm, now you qualify as a seer. Otherwise, if you suffice with the superficial, even animals can see. Now, I'm not saying everyone to see metaphysical truths. Some people may see it momentarily. Some people a bit more, some people a bit less. But this is the aim. In many verses of the Quran, the objective is seeing, not with the physical eye. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ. Those who say, our Lord is Allah. Aqa'id. Aqa'id has degrees to it. You have to dig deep. Those who say our Lord is Allah, ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا, then they are steadfast upon it. Action. A'mal. A'mal has degrees. We have to endeavor. But you endeavor in these two domains according to explicit verses of the Quran. What will happen? تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ. Angels will descend upon them. This is not an ideal which Islam just, as a sign, as very lofty and outside our reach. It's something we have to aim for. Now, many of us may have seen angels, but we weren't aware of it. Maybe some of you at Fajr time, for example, you suddenly heard a knock on the door and you woke up. You felt it was Fajr now. The person beside you heard nothing. Due to some degree of action and aqa'id, you were woken up, but you had access to the angel by the knocking of a door, and you didn't hear it with the physical ear either, otherwise the person beside you would have heard it. Some people may hear a voice, wake up, and they wake up, it's Fajr time. The person beside them heard nothing. Some people see the angel. See, there are degrees to it, but aqa'id and a'mal. So this is not just a theoretical thing. The aim is seeing a community without Irfan, a community which suffices with the superficial. That community is not going to grow. It's like a corpse. Now, you may go to heaven. This is not about a heaven or hell issue. Many entities go to heaven. You may be a corpse. Spirituality will still go to heaven. Heaven has degrees. All the incompetent go to heaven. Many animals go to heaven. You see, going to heaven itself, there are degrees to it. Our potential is much higher. Now, so you see, the goal is Irfan, seeing. Some people, we have to differentiate between Irfan and the science of Irfan. Some people see the metaphysical truths to greater or lesser extent. They see it, and that's of value. Once you start seeing in your daily lives, you will sin much less than someone who never sees. Because now you're seeing the truths of the cosmos. You're seeing beyond the physical. This seeing, if it's the seeing, not with the physical eye, if it's in relation to the realities of the cosmos, heaven, hell, that you're seeing, we call that theoretical Irfan. It's a seeing, not with the physical eye, but it's a seeing of the realities of the cosmos. Sometimes people see, let's say, certain figures which describe to them the stations and steps to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They may see an imam in one's dream or whilst awake. They see the imam giving them an instruction on how to do repentance, for example. That's also Irfan. It's a kind of seeing beyond the physical. But this seeing and Irfan is called practical Irfan. But this is Irfan, that's the goal. These people who see, when they come and write it in a book, the book then becomes the science of Irfan. Either the science of theoretical Irfan or the science of practical Irfan. But the goal is Irfan itself, not the science of Irfan. Some people may see the realities, they see the truths, but they're illiterate. They've never studied the science of Irfan. It's possible. And it's not even necessary for them to study the science of Irfan when they're seeing the truths, they're seeing the realities of the cosmos, they're seeing the angels, they're seeing the Imam. The science of Irfan can be a preliminary to Irfan itself. But studying the science of Irfan without that aim of acquiring Irfan would be futile. It will only add to your ego. So it can be a preliminary, but I don't want to see the science of Irfan in that light here. What I want to share with you in the next few nights is another use, another benefit of the science of Irfan, and why the science of Irfan is important. Irrespective of whether you succeed to see or not, it has other, maybe less significant, but still important benefits, the science of Irfan. And the benefit is, it provides you with an Irfani world view. And this is important, especially for the youth, especially in the West. An Irfani world view is a must. And I'll try and support this claim during the next few nights. Now, Imam Khomeini, in another of his works, in his Sahifa, which is a collection of all his works and speeches and so on and so forth, he says, let's not distance ourselves from the Quran. In this dialogue, referring to the Quran, in this dialogue and whispering between the lover and the beloved, the Holy Messenger and Allah, there are secrets that no other but Allah and Allah's lover have access to. Even the possibility does not exist. It's only between the Holy Messenger and Allah. There are some secrets which no one has access to. Then Imam continues. He says many of the noble verses to which the scholars of the letter, philosophy, Irfan, Sufism provide commentaries or ta'wil for themselves is of the same nature. Now what does that mean? It's a very delicate point, this. We in the Quran you won't find the science of fiqh, the science of the ahkam. You won't find in the Quran the science of tafsir, the science of theology, the science of philosophy. These aren't found in the Quran. But the scientists, using the Quran and the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, they build principles, each scientist for their own science, with the help of the Quran and Ahadith, they build principles, and then it's called the science of fiqh, the science of kalam, theology, the science of philosophy, the science of tariq, the science of tafsir, and the science of Irfan. You see, all of them have one thing in common. They're extrapolating their principles from the Quran and the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt and rationality. However, the principles and criteria which each group of scientists is using is different to the criteria that the other science and scientists are using. What's the result? The result is the degree of benefit from the Quran and the Ahadith varies between the sciences. The benefit you get from the Quran through the Sharia, which I'm loosely translating as fiqh, is less, albeit essential, because the Sharia is the first step. You can't get to step 2 if you don't master the Sharia, fiqh, ahkam, the wajibat and the muharramat. It should never be undermined. It's a first step. The benefit that you acquire from the Quran through the principles of kalam is a bit more. Through the principles of philosophy, a bit more. The benefit varies depending on the science and that science's principles. Each science benefits to varying degrees. In the same way that the Holy Messenger, with that relationship he had with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there were secrets that no one can have access to. The secrets that one science, such as Irfan, can get access to from the Quran is not accessible to the scientists of other sciences, namely fiqh, kalam, even philosophy. That's important here. Imam has mentioned this very delicate point. He's not saying forget those other sciences, but appreciate with Irfan the access to the Quran and to the secrets of the Quran, as Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh said. The access to it, you won't have access to those secrets through the principles of fiqh, because the principles of fiqh has another agenda. It's much more limited, it's much more superficial, albeit the first step, albeit essential. So Imam is mentioning this here. Then he says, nevertheless, each genre of scholars will benefit or imagine to be benefiting on a par with their according capacities. Each science bears its own capacity. It can only evaluate and extrapolate on a par with its own criteria. Minutiae from these secrets are conveyed by means of revelations Ahlul Bayt to others according to their potential, and maybe most of their du'as and supplications have been selected for this purpose. The du'as and the supplications, they're outside all these criteria of different sciences. It's speaking to the fitrah of people. And maybe one of the purposes behind du'as and supplications is that even for the common layperson, for the masses, they can have their share of benefit from the inner secrets of the Quran. Imam, in his book Adab al-Salat, has said, those who invite towards the mere letter of religion and prevent people from accessing the inner etiquettes, and who say, other than this letter and shell, the Sharia bears no meaning or truth, these people are the shayateen. No one has the audacity to speak like this. These people are the shayateen, the satans upon the path to Allah, and the thorns in the way of humans. One must take refuge in Allah against such people's vice, because they cancel and eliminate the light of the divine fitrah, which is the light of Irfan and Tawheed and Walaya in man. And were a divine theosopher or a lordly Gnostic to open a door amongst the doors of mercy before Allah's servants and to read a page of the pages of divine wisdom, these people will not be barred at all in calling them bad names, swearing and acting takfiri style. Those in Syria who's what were called takfiris because they call everyone a kafir. You pray like that, you're a kafir. You like Amir al-Mu'minin, you're a kafir. We have such people, those who act in such a style in relation to the Urafa. They keep on calling the Urafa kafir. Very easily. People who have their knowledge is very weak or limited. They've never studied the books. Everyone is a kafir. Every arif is a kafir. Imam Khomeini, his son, Shahid Mustafa, when he was drinking from a jug in the main headquarters of the Hawza bomb, the scholars in Qom said the jug is najis because they regarded his father, Imam, as najis, because they regarded Imam as a kafir. because of his words in philosophy and Irfan. Now these people don't, although they've studied fiqh, and they're calling Imam a kafir, but why did they call his son a kafir? Because even on a par with the principles of fiqh, when a child, let's say a child has two parents and one is kafir and one is a Muslim, or there's a principle where you choose Ashraful Amudain, the more lofty of the two religions of the parents. That's the religion of the child. Even according to fiqh principles, even if Imam Na'udhu was a kafir, the child, Shaykh Mustafa, adopts the religion of the mother who was Muslim. They even attacked the mother. They even went against their own fiqh principles. This is the state of mind. Acting takfiri. Imam was a recipient to such people. When Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh, one of his students, recently went to see Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Sistani said, be patient with people who attack you. Yes, these are wise words. Be patient. And finally, in Adab al-Salat, Imam says, a group of us scholars have denied the stations of Irfan, and deemed the people of such stations as being in error and void and acting futilely. And were anyone to mention them or invite people to their stations, these scholars will regard him as making things up, or will deem their invitations as rubbish. There is no hope in making this group of people aware of their faults and defects, or in awakening them from their heavy sleep. وَمَا أَنْتَ بِمُسْمِعٍ مَنْ فِي الْغُبُورِ. You can't make those hear, those who are in their graves. Now they're alive, they're not buried underneath, but they're in their graves. They're buried in their animal dimension. You can't make such people hear. Imam uses this verse of the Quran. So, in summary, what I want to say is, for Muslim identity, for the youth especially, in the West, those who are born and bred in the West, an important ingredient that can establish one's identity in the West is having an Irfani worldview. Because with Irfan, the look, the approach is different to all matters of religion. It has a different set of principles. And tomorrow, inshallah, I want to go through some articles of faith, intercession, shafa'ah. How do the Urafa look at it? La'ana, cursing. There's about 50 odd cursing we see in Ziyarat Ashura. But do we know what cursing entails? Is it only the superficial aspect of cursing which is important? The Urafa open more light on what cursing is, in a manner that when you say it, you grow at the same time. But an Irfan-less cursing is a lifeless corpse. And there are other articles of faith during the next few nights, inshallah, we'll share with one another. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala alihi.